Hi and welcome to Elizabeth Ann Reads. I'm Ann, and today we're going to talk about basically just kind of my reading year in 2019. We're going to go over just a few stats and then some of the books that stood out to me. I don't think I'm going to call this a favorites list. I think, although some of these books definitely have been favorites this year, but I think I'm going to refer to it more as books that have stuck with me or stood out to me, or books that I've continued to think about even after completing them, and just share with you some of those things that have kind of been with me through the year. So all in all this year, I had a decent reading year, probably not my best ever. I read 111 books. Of those, let me think. 12 of them were nonfiction, which is not great, but actually a little better than I thought it would be. And then 19 of them were rereads, which is significantly fewer than I thought that I had reread this year. Because I like to reread, and I always feel like I reread a lot, but evidently I didn't this year, or nearly as much as I thought. But yeah, that's my overall just kind of glance at my stats over the year. I didn't break it up into what genres I read, because I don't care. And you probably don't, I don't know, maybe you do, but I don't, so I didn't figure it out. I found this year, like I've been watching Booktube for a couple years, but I found that being part of Booktube changed my reading a little bit this year, and I found that I was picking up a lot more things that I was interested in but weren't necessarily at the top of my priority list. So I felt like the books I read overall this year, there were very few that really stood out. I read a lot of good books, but there were very few that kind of stood out above the rest as this is a new favorite that I will come back to again and again and again. So I think going into 2020, I want to be more purposeful, to be choosing books that I really, really want to read. Because a lot of those just kind of got pushed to the side this year because I was trying to read shorter things, or I was trying to read popular things. I don't think I was really trying to read popular things, but I was, participating in readathons, so I was trying to find books that met challenges or prompts. And again, I read a lot of good books this year. I just feel like there wasn't kind of that upper tier of these books were super, super excellent. There are a couple that I would put in that category, but really not very many of the books I read this year. A lot of really good books, a lot of 4-star books, a lot of even some 5 stars, but very few that I would call new favorites. So yeah, we're just going to kind of take a glance at some of the things I've read this year and go over those. The first thing I want to mention is the books I'm going to be talking about today are all books that I read for the first time this year. We're not going to go over rereads because those are already favorites because I'm rereading them. But I do want to mention one reread to start off, and that is The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. I reread 4 Kate Morton books this year. This Forgotten Garden has always been my favorite. It's the only one I've reread before this year, so this was my 3rd time reading it. And it definitely was my favorite reread of the year. Something about this 3rd time reading it struck me so differently. If you don't know, this is a historical fiction dual timeline, and it's a pretty heavy story. It talks about 2 women they're basically sisters. They're raised as sisters. One's kind of adopted into the family, so they're more or less raised as sisters and best friends. And then some stuff goes down. I'm not going to go into a lot of the plot because you should read it. But it's a pretty heavy book. There's a lot of heartache, which I love that in a book. But I wasn't expecting it to affect me the way it did this time around. It seemed so much more difficult to read, like in a good way. Like I was identifying with the characters more. I was seeing their struggles more and not just seeing the black and white choices that they were making and what they were doing wrong, but seeing their perspective more, I think, and seeing that even the black and white choice doesn't, like I saw their struggles with what seemed like an obviously wrong choice to me, on the surface. Like you see, I don't know, I felt like I was the characters more this time, and that being faced with impossible choices where there doesn't seem to be a good solution and everything is going to go wrong no matter what you choose. And Yeah, I don't know why this was so different this time, if it was because it was the third time I had read it, so the story was so much more familiar to me and I knew what was coming, and I just ached so much for the characters in this book. And yeah, I don't know. It was really good. I really want to pick it up again. So who knows? I may pick it up again in 2020. But if you haven't read The Forgotten Garden or Kate Morton at all, you should definitely pick it up. All right, moving on to the new books I read this year. I have one nonfiction that I want to talk about. And ironically, this is one of my favorite books of the year. I would probably put it in like my top 3 favorites. And that is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I received this for Christmas in 2018, so it was one of the first books I read in 2019. And you can see there's a bookmark in there. That's because I'm actually currently rereading it at the beginning of 2020. And this just talks about how we form habits and some of the mistakes we make when we're trying to set up good routines and habits in our life. And he talks about a lot of different things, and it's an easy read. You should read it for sure and take notes. You can see I'm starting to do some notes and annotating happening in here. But he talks about how we get in the mindset of creating perfect habits. Like we decide, oh, I want to exercise for 1 hour every day, and we try and jump to the exercising for 1 hour every day. Instead of starting a habit small and then perfecting it, we try and jump right to the perfect habit, so we fail. So he says, instead of, make that your end goal, but work on the process of how you get there. So you're creating a successful process, not just reaching a goal. So he says if you want to exercise 1 hour a day, then start by making a habit of putting your workout clothes on. You don't even have to work out, but get in the habit of putting those workout clothes on and then add to it. Get in the habit, of working out for 5 minutes. Once you've established that habit of putting the workout clothes on, get the 5-minute workout in. And so you're building consistency and then perfecting the habit as you go, instead of jumping right to this huge change in your life. And how much more effective that is. And then we're focused on building ourselves as a person and not just focused on achieving a goal. So, if our goal is to run a marathon, and then we spend all this time working towards that, and then we run the marathon, and then it's over. Like there's no need to keep running after that point because you've achieved your goal. So he talks a lot about building the type of person you want to be, not just achieving goals. Anyway, that was a lot of explanation. It's a really good book. You should read it. All right, let's talk about some of the other books I read this year that have just kind of stood out to me. And we're going to start with a couple different middle grade series. I love a good middle grade series, and I found a couple great ones this year. The first that I want to mention has definitely been going around Booktube a little bit, and that is the Tilly and the Book Wanderers series, or Pages & Co. I'm not sure what the series name is. By Anna James. There's currently 2 out in the series, and I read them both this year. I believe I read them both during 24-hour readathons. And they're so much fun. They're so sweet and charming, and they follow Tilly and her adventures in the book world. She discovers that she can go into books and pull characters out of books, and so she's friends with Anne of Green Gables and Alice in Wonderland, and goes on these adventures, and there's a great villain, and they're just fantastic. You should definitely pick them up. If you're not familiar with these, give them a try. The other middle grade series I want to mention is the Keeper of the Lost Cities series by Shannon Messenger. There are currently 8 books in this series. This is the first one. And I read these over the summer, and it was such a fun summer read. It's not like the best books ever written, but they're so much fun. And it follows Sophie, who finds out right at the beginning of the first book that she's not human as she thought. She was raised human, but she's actually an elf. And so she goes to the elven world, whatever. And, there's kind of secret societies and just all kinds of things, a lot of upheaval and political things going on in this other world that she is kind of by default a part of. This book has great friendships in it. It has great parent-child relationships, which I love seeing in middle grade. And it's just really, really fun. I also love that when I read these, I passed them on to my mom because she saw me reading them and she was curious. So she read them and loved them. I was able to pass them on to my nieces, who range in age from 6 to 17. And they all read them and loved them. And it's just been so much fun to have these books that have just kind of surpassed the generations and that we can all read and talk about and laugh about and, decide which characters we like better. And it's fun to have that kind of that shared love with family members. So it's been a really fun series. If you enjoy middle grade fantasy, if you have a broad range of ages that you're kind of connected with, I definitely suggest picking up this series. All right, well, we're on a fantasy kick. Let's talk about Brandon Sanderson, because I finally read Brandon Sanderson this year, and it was wonderful, and I loved it. So I read the Mistborn trilogy. I read all three of them, and I also read Skyward. I have Starsight. I haven't picked it up yet. I will pick it up very, very soon. But it was so much fun to discover this new world. I love epic fantasy. Skyward is science fiction. Just throwing that out there, because someone's going to say that in the comments. I know. But let's talk about Mistborn. I love epic fantasy, but I'm often intimidated by it. I find it hard to commit to epic fantasy for some reason. But this was such a fun world to be part of, and Brandon Sanderson does such a good job at creating just unique ways of looking at things and unique magic systems, and it's just, it was so fantastic. I'm definitely going to be picking up more. I'm going to pick up the next trilogy, the second Mistborn trilogy this year, for sure. I already mentioned Starsight. I'll be picking that up. I'm probably going to try and pick up The Way of Kings. What's that series called? Whatever it's called, the one that starts with Way of Kings, where all the books are like 1,000+ pages. Stormlight Archives. That's it. I'm probably going to pick up that this year as well, and just really dive more into Brandon Sanderson this year, because it was so much fun to discover him as an author this year. All right, I mentioned that Atomic Habits would have been like one of my top 3 reads this year. Tenant of Wildfell Hall would have probably been, if I was, naming them, this would probably be my favorite book of the year. This is by Anne Bronte. I read both this and Agnes Grey this year, which was also fantastic, but I liked this one more. I can't even say enough good things about this book. I'm going to be rereading it for sure in 2020. This follows a woman who moves into kind of a new community. She has a young son, and there's a little bit of mystery surrounding her past, and so it delves into that a little bit, but she is such a fantastic character. She is so smart and witty and so well-spoken, and her opinions, even when they differ, which they often do from, the general population, are so well thought out, and she just explains things so well, and it's just so good. And I feel like Jane Eyre, for me, I know not everyone loves Jane Eyre. I love Jane Eyre. But I feel like Jane Eyre has this, you love it when you're young, as a teenager, because it's romantic, and, it's big and dramatic and sweeping, and it's just so good. And I still love Jane Eyre. But I feel like this I relate to more as a slightly significantly older woman, having life and experience behind me. I feel like I connect with Helen so much more than I do now with Jane. And again, I still love them both, but I just love this book so much. When I reread it this year, I may try and do a dedicated review. Who knows when that will be, sometime this year. But so good. All right, the next book I want to mention is A Prayer for Ellen Meany by John Irving. This had been on my TBR for a long time. And I finally got to it this fall, and I really liked it. It was not what I was expecting, and I don't think as I was reading it that I thought it would have made my favorites list. Although I did really enjoy reading it, there was nothing about it at the time that really stood out to me. And then I got to the end. And the ending has just stuck with me so much through this year. This follows Owen Meany and his friend, and just kind of their growing up experience, being kids together, being teens together, being young adults together. And Owen has this experience when he's a kid that he something tragic happens and he thinks that he is responsible for it. He feels the blame for that. And so he feels like that God has a very specific purpose for everything he is and does in life. And so everything is kind of seen through that lens of God's purpose for me. And God created me this way because, or for whatever reason, even though I don't know right now. And it just, that's always kind of in the background of what's happening. But then you get to the end and you see all these things that have been part of his life, his experiences with his friend, just all these different things come together in this moment at the end of the book. And it is awful and amazing and so good. The ending is so beautiful. And it's definitely something, even though I'm still not sure I would call this like a favorite book of all time, it has definitely stuck with me, and I've continued to think about it and think about the ending and think about just different things from the book and just different situations and reactions. And yeah, I would definitely recommend picking this up. It is a bit of a slow read. It's not one you're going to like speed through really fast, but take your time, get to know the characters, enjoy it, and let that ending just wreck you. Okay, another book I want to talk about is The One by John Marrs. This is a thriller that I read over the summer. I think I read it during a readathon. It's a great readathon book, by the way, if you're looking for good readathon books. There's basically a dating app that will match you to your perfect person based on your DNA. So it is the one perfect match for you based on your DNA, which is a really interesting concept to begin with. And then this book follows 5 different storylines. And it's continually, each chapter is alternating between these 5 storylines. So you're constantly moving, and the chapters are really short. So you're constantly moving through these 5 different stories. And as you can imagine, this creates all kinds of drama, because who knows who you will be matched with. You might be matched with someone who is much older or much younger than you, someone who lives on the other side of the world, someone who's dead, someone who's, a serial killer. And it also has a lot of heartache in it, because it can break up marriages if you find out you're married to not the one. So this is not the type of book I normally go for, but it just, again, it's one of those books that has really stuck with me and made me think, that I've continued to think about and process, and what if, and what would this be like, and would I do this? And I don't know, I love books that make me think kind of outside the box, and this definitely did that. Again, it's a great readathon book. If you're looking for something that you're going to be able to move through really quickly, this is a great option. I definitely want to pick up some more books by John Marrs and see what else he has to offer. All right, another book I want to mention was Liane Moriarty's Big Little Lies. This is my first Liane Moriarty. I've hesitated in reading this because I tend to not like really popular books, but I had found it at a library book sale and picked it up, and it's been sitting there on my shelf for a while, and I finally picked it up. And I loved it. Again, it's one of those books that you just want to move through really quickly, because you want to know what happens, and you want to know where the characters are going, and what the mystery is, and who did what, and what the big reveal is. Her storytelling is very unique in that there's an event that happens at the beginning. At the beginning of the book, there's an event that happens at the end, and then she spends the whole book like leading up to this event, like 6 months before the event, 4 months before the event, 1 week before the event. So it's all building to this one big climax. And it's just the way she writes it is so creative, and so you want so much to know what the big event is, and what happens, and who is involved, and who is responsible. And it was great. If you've hesitated picking this up because it's popular or for whatever reason, don't hesitate anymore. Pick it up. I will definitely be picking up more Liane Moriarty in 2020. All right, one book sneaked into this list right at the end of the year, and that is A Lot Like Christmas by Connie Willis. Connie Willis is one of my favorite authors. She writes science fiction. This is a collection of Christmas stories. They're short stories, science fiction Christmas stories. She had another book previously called Miracle and Other Christmas Stories that has some of these same stories in it, but this came out a couple years ago and has more stories, and it's more of a collection from different places that her stories have been published. So some of these stories I had read before, but not all of them. Connie Willis is brilliant. When I finished reading this, I actually messaged a friend of mine who's also read Connie Willis, and I just said, Connie Willis is a national treasure. And I can't believe more people don't read her. I'm going to definitely be talking about Connie Willis more in 2020 because I haven't, and that's a huge disservice because she deserves to be talked about because she is amazing. She writes stories that are so just unique and quirky and outside the norm, and she has this ability to create characters you love instantly. I don't generally read short stories. I don't like short stories. I don't like books that don't delve deep. That's why I tend to like series more than standalones, because I want to get to know my characters and I want to care about them and I want to know their whole life story. I'm this way in real life too, in case you're curious. Like, I don't do shallow surface. I don't like it. It's a waste of time. But anyway, that was a side note. Sorry. But Connie Willis has these characters that I just connect with and love from the first sentence. They're just amazing. And her stories are so funny. And she has a way of putting like these cultural references in that shouldn't work, and yet somehow they do. For example, okay, if you pick this up and you're like, oh, I just want to read one story, read All Seated on the Ground, which is one I had never read before. And I read it, and it's set in the future, and basically a spaceship lands, and there's aliens that come. And the people are trying to figure out how to communicate with the aliens. Which sounds cheesy, I know. But she does it so well. And she makes a reference to Star Wars Episode 9, which you're like, well, no big deal. Star Wars Episode 9 just came out. No, the story was written in 2001, long before there was this most recent Star Wars trilogy came out. She just expected there to be a Star Wars Episode 9. And I love that I read that less than a week after I had gone and seen Star Wars Episode 9. I don't know, she's so good. And if you don't like short stories, try Connie Willis. You'll love her. I shouldn't say that, because probably someone out there doesn't love her. But I don't know how you could not love her, because she's amazing. And I'm sorry, this is a huge rant, but seriously, go read Connie Willis. I will be doing more videos talking about her books in the future, because I want everyone out there that's watching this video to read Connie Willis this year. If she's not on your radar, put her on your radar. She should be. Okay, that's it. I have a feeling this is a super long video. But yeah, I just wanted to do kind of a 2019 in review, and that was it. So now we're going into 2020. I'm really excited for what 2020 is going to hold, reading-wise, and, life-wise. Definitely going to be doing more rereading. I'm going to be picking up books that I really, really am excited about. I'm already picking up books that I'm really, really excited about, and I'm already rereading. So, yeah, it's going to be a good year. I hope you join me for my reading and life journeys this year. And, yeah, let me know down in the comments below if there's anything specifically you'd like to see from me this year. Because I am not super creative with coming up with ideas. So, let me know down below, and thank you for watching.